Hi everyone! This masterclass is literally here by popular demand. We asked the Village WhatsApp group what you wanted more guidance and support on, and sleep was by far the number one priority. So who better to hold this masterclass than Louise Duncan, the founder of Petite Dreamers and very proudly Asia's number one trusted paediatric sleep expert. I'm Kathy, your host. I'm a certified postpartum and infant care doula, village building expert, mum, and the founder of Pregnant and Popped. I will be saying all the important, boring stuff before we begin, and then I'll be handing over to Louise. But I'll jump back in towards the end to moderate the Q&A session later. Super conscious that you're not here to hear about me though, so let's get through the boring stuff quickly. The legal stuff. The educational content of our masterclasses is the work of our Pregnant and Popped providers. We are not licensed medical or legal professionals, and this is neither a medical nor legal platform. The content of today should not be considered medical or legal advice. Instead, it is always best to consult your specialist providers for any specific concerns or questions, and use the information from today as a complementary tool to help guide those discussions and care plans. Now, as we are about to dive in, I am so excited to introduce you to today's expert, Louise Duncan. Louise is Southeast Asia's most experienced sleep sense consultant, having helped, wait for it, over 1,000 families find their rhythm and rest over the past years. She's not only been trained personally by the founder of the Sleep Sense method, but she's also walked this journey herself as a mum of two who knows just how hard sleep deprivation can hit. Louise brings both professional expertise and real-life understanding to everything she teaches, and I know you're going to find her approach practical, empowering, and so supportive. So I'm going to hand over to Louise, and I can't wait for all of the tips she's going to share with you.
Hi everybody, I'm Louise, and today we're going to be talking about raising a rested baby, sleep strategies that actually work. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me and my offsider Hannah. I'm the founder of Petite Dreamers. Hannah has been working for me since 2000, so for the last 5 years. And we both trained using the Sleep Sense methodology by its creator, Dana Obelman. I am a mum now. I've been a mum now for 14 years, but my son is 14 and my daughter is 11. And it was through my daughter's horrible sleep that I needed to find a solution. And I went through the process of sleep training my baby with a consultant who was Sleep Sense, who was here in Asia for a little while. And Hannah came and decided to do the training after her and I had worked together to sleep train both of her boys. So her and I have the same kind of sensibilities when it comes to sleep training babies. Last year, between us, we worked with about 200 families. And I kind of feel like the OG, and I don't mean the original group, I mean the old girl of sleep training here in Singapore, because I've been at it for 10 years. And before me, there was a lady called Jackie Roach. She'd been here a long time, but she's not been here for a while. And then there's me. So, yeah, I feel like I've been at it for a very long time, talking about poor sleepless babies when they're very sleepless parents. So today, my goal is to help you, to move you along from feeling like this, that overwhelmed baby sleeping in your arms all the time, to being a bit more like this. Happy with an engaged and happy baby who's well rested, so that you also can be well rested. So there's a few bits that I want to kind of cover off today, and please bear in mind I could be here talking to you for 3 weeks about sleep and still not cover the same thing twice. So it's always really hard to try and pull out some little bits that I think will help move your sleep game along. So the first thing that I always like to talk about is why sleep matters, the common sleep myths, like creating a sleep sanctuary, and then things like the awake windows by age and what can help, what you can try tonight and also today. So like they're the bits that we're going to be covering. And then at the end, I've got some special bits for you, as well as we'll be doing a Q&A. So please don't be shy. I'll happily answer anything. I know that sleep training can be quite polarizing, and I'm here to try and bust some of those myths and give you some really good advice that can, as I said, help your sleep game straight away. Alrighty, so why does sleep matter? So sleep isn't a luxury, it's a basic human need. Or as I often say to my parents, sleep isn't a Prada handbag, it's a must-have, not a want-to-have, it's a need-to-have. So there's the 5 key reasons why sleep is important. The first one is that it helps us physically grow. Like when I always say to my kids, even now, you have to have a good night's sleep because that's when you will grow. The next thing is that it helps develop our brain. Good sleep will then have our brain doing what it's supposed to do overnight, which is processing memory and learning. It's the ultimate mood regulator and emotional regulator. I'm sure that amongst the parents here today that if you haven't had a good night's sleep, that we can often feel, I know I used to feel pretty cranky with my husband. We'd snap at one another because we weren't getting enough sleep. So we were just not being our best, kind selves to one another. The other thing that it does is it helps boost our immunity. So obviously, you know yourself, if you haven't been sleeping well, you're more susceptible to kind of feel a bit grotty and feeling like you've got a cold, but maybe not. And you're very quick to pick up viruses. And then very lastly, good sleep actually helps promote attachment and bonding between parents and their children and their parents, babies and their parents. So the common myths around sleep and sleep training. Look, and when I did this, when I first created these slides, I kid you not, I probably had about 50 of these common myths, but I've narrowed it down to 3 in this section. I'm going to sort of bust a few myths along the way as well. But the first one is that some babies just don't sleep. I am here to tell you that it is a basic human need for everybody to sleep. So your little one not sleeping isn't because they don't want to. It's really because they don't know how to put themselves into a deep sleep. The second myth is if your baby cries, you're doing them harm. Look, the reality is that as parents, we take it quite personally upon ourselves if our children aren't doing the things that we expect them to do. If our babies cry, it almost attacks our own ego and we think to ourselves, why is my baby crying? Ultimately, I know that every parent that I work with, all they want for their baby is the absolute best. And their cries do play a part in their development in terms of when your baby cries, there's usually a reason for it. If they haven't fed for a while, the reason they're crying is because they are hungry. If they're crying, it could be that they've got a pooey nappy or a wet nappy and they're uncomfortable. And ultimately, oftentimes kids will cry because they are just so tired. And the last one we'll talk about today, especially in regards to sleep training, is that oftentimes, and I get this so often, is breastfed babies don't sleep as well as formula-fed babies. It is just not true. Sleep is a function of the brain. It is not a function of the gut. So a well-fed baby, whether that is breastfed or bottle-fed formula, is going to sleep, has the ability to sleep well. Obviously, if you've got a baby that is having some feeding issues, then yeah, it could very well be that they are waking up out of hunger, but any kind of sleep intervention should not be about starving children into submission. My approach is if your baby needs a night feed, then they're certainly going to get a night feed. And I don't expect, if somebody came to me with a 2-month-old baby, I am not going to say to them they should be sleeping through the night without food, because that is just not the case. So please kind of bear these 3 things in mind when you're thinking about your baby's sleep. So the next thing is, if you've been to my talk before at Pregnant and Popped at the fair, I do go through this sleep sanctuary checklist, and I'm going to go through it again today because I really do think it is so important. Where our babies sleep and our sleep environment plays a massive part in how well we will sleep. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is creating a sleep sanctuary. The first thing is keep it simple. Your baby, it's beautiful to see all these Pinterest boards with the most amazing bedrooms, but realistically, all a baby really needs is a safe space to sleep. And my approach is that babies should sleep in either a bassinet or a cot, and toddlers should be from 2.5 years and older should be in a bed. The next thing is that swaddling your baby. I would say from newborn to 3 months onwards, it would be a sleep bag, which is really just a wearable blanket. Please know from a safe sleep point of view that blankets shouldn't be used in babies' cribs at all. So realistically, your baby shouldn't be using a blanket until they're at least 2 or 3 once they go into their bed. The next thing is I would just remove anything out of the cot. You want your baby's sleep space to be calming and not too stimulating. So remove any bumpers, blankets, pillows, toys, mobiles, or positioners. They just don't need it. The next thing is keeping the room dark. Now, when I was talking the other day with Kathy, when I was going over what we were talking, like what I was going to talk about today, we both agreed that like napping during the day in Singapore is almost impossible. Like it is so hard. And the reason is that the more our brain absorbs light, more it sends it to our body that says, hey, we should be awake. So when it comes to creating a sleep sanctuary, the best thing that you can do is make sure your baby's bedroom is as dark as possible. The next thing is that to the point where like some babies are so light sensitive that even the light on the aircon, or when I'm going over to people's homes and looking at their sleep space, I'll have a roll of black tape that I'll cover those things up. And then just remove the night light. Like if you're putting your baby down in your bedroom at nighttime or in their bedroom at nighttime and you're leaving on a light, my suggestion is saying to turn it off, because babies aren't scared. They're not scared of the dark. They haven't learned to be scared yet. So unless you're feeding or unless you're having to go in and check on your baby, like keep the room as dark as possible, because it is the best possible place for them to be sleeping, and they will sleep more soundly if the room is dark. The next thing is that I am a massive believer in noise here in Singapore. Like I'm fortunate, I live in a house, but equally I have very noisy neighbours that I share the party wall with. I, as a 50-year-old woman, use white noise in my bedroom. So if you're living in an apartment and you've got a family that have got maybe school-aged kids living above you that might be a bit noisier, then using white noise is really important. The other thing is that we should never get used to just sleeping in silence, because we would never do it here in Singapore if we had to sleep in silence. And that's just purely because Singapore is a busy urban city. There is always noise of some description. When it comes to using white noise, it should always play from the time your baby goes into bed to the time they come out of bed, which means that overnight it would be playing all night long. The next step is just keeping it cool. Singapore is hard. It can be really tough because every aircon remote control in your house is probably being dropped about 20 times at least. So that it's not always so accurate, the temperature on the display to what is actually happening. So, but generally speaking, I think around, if your baby's in their own room in their cot at nighttime and it's a decent sized room, I would probably say around 24 degrees. And a little bit cooler during the day, like 22 to 24. And I would dress, for nighttime, I would dress them in, like I say, long sleeves and long leg pajamas, like footy pajamas, and put them in a 0.2 to 0.5 tog sleep bag. The best way you're going to know whether your baby is actually cold at nighttime is if they keep on waking up from 4 o'clock onwards. Our body temperature drops to its lowest at around 4 o'clock in the morning. So if you've got a baby that's waking up at 4 o'clock and you get them back to sleep and then they wake up again and then they go back to sleep, it's probably because they are a little bit cold. It is very subjective. Like at the moment, and I'll be honest, I'm perimenopausal, so my aircon's down at as low as it will go and I still have a fan on me. My 6'3" husband is now sleeping under 2 duvets because he's cold, because I'm trying to regulate my own temperature. So it is quite subjective. So just keep that in mind. You'll always know if your baby is hot because they will sweat and you'll think, oh, okay, it is a bit hot in here. And then the last step to creating a sleep sanctuary is just avoiding stimulation before bedtime. In a newborn baby, it would be if you've got everyone coming over for dinner and they're passing the baby around, that would be a lot of stimulation before bedtime. In the world of a toddler, it might be that you're having play dates too late into the afternoon. Other things that you could do is you could just avoid like flashing toys. I used to have a rule after 5 o'clock when my kids were little, was no noisy and flashy toys. It was the time that if we were going to do anything, it would be like we would either go outside and play or we would play with blocks or something like that. Okay. So that is creating a sleep sanctuary. The next part that I want to talk about, and look, somebody came up to me at the fair. At the Pregnant Pop Fair, I give out a door hanger that looks like those ones in the hotel that say "Do not disturb," and I've got it on the back side of it that there's all of this information. And this is my Baby Sleep Quick Reference Guide. What I really want to focus on today is that, like, awake windows, they do move pretty quickly in the first 6 months of a baby's life. So a newborn baby's awake window is probably only 45 minutes, but by the time they're 6 months old, it's moved by 2 hours and 15 minutes. So please know that it is not uncommon for you to think that you've got something sorted out and then one day they sleep really well and the next day they don't. It could just mean that they need a bump in their awake window. So, like, I do think that it is really important. The other thing I would say is that if you have been following, say, other programs like Little Ones or Gina Ford or Taking Care of Babies, their awake windows are a little bit lower than mine. And that's purely because in Singapore, as I said before, our environment is so much different to anywhere else in the world. And we do absorb a lot of sunshine here. So it tends to be that our awake windows tend to need to be a little bit longer in order to then create enough sleep pressure to keep our baby asleep for a decent nap. One other thing that I will say about napping is I really do lean into some sleep is better than no sleep. Again, a lot of sleep training programs will say that this nap should be this amount of time and that nap, and first nap should be this and second nap should be this. And I lean into, it tends to be easier for babies to do better naps in the morning than it is in the afternoon. And I really will think that any amount of sleep is better than no sleep. Okay. The other thing that I do want to bring up here at this point too is that, again, I think that, like, we will all sleep best in a dark, cool environment. And if you look at it from an adult point of view, you will always sleep best in your own bed than, say, if you fall asleep on the sofa at nighttime, or if you would say to fall asleep in the bus as you're coming home from work. So we all sleep best in a dark, cool environment. That is not to say that, like, getting out and about is really important for not just your baby, but for you too, for your own mental health and well-being, catching up with friends, mooching around the shops, getting the groceries. So when it comes to take baby sleeping, like, if you ever go down a path or you're reading that all naps should be at home, I really don't kind of buy into that. I think that if you are at home and you can create the best sleep environment for your baby, that's great, that's amazing. But equally knowing that, especially when you've got a newborn baby, if every nap had to be at home, you'd never leave the house. So it's about finding that balance between having some naps at home, but also then knowing that if your baby naps on the go, it is okay. And actually, more power to you, because some babies won't nap so well out. But again, I really do lean into that some sleep is better than no sleep. All righty. So the last part of this today is that we're going to talk about some of the things that you can try today and tonight. So the first thing that I want you to do is step one is to incorporate play into your day. I cannot tell you the number of times I've had this conversation with parents, and the way I explain it is this. Oftentimes here in Asia, there's mum and dad at home, like there's two parents at home, a helper, there might be a grandparent or two floating around in the mix as well, plus one very cute baby. There is a real tendency that children here don't get enough time to play on the floor, to burn through their energy, that they get carried around a lot. So it is really important to incorporate some play into your day so that your baby's not just brain tired, but they're body tired as well. The other thing that I said is, like, observing your baby's awake window closely. Now, you've just seen this on the other slide, but I think it is so important that, like, when it comes time to, like, keeping an eye on their awake window, the biggest pushback I get around naps is when I've got parents that come to me and I might have a 4-month-old baby who's only doing an hour's worth of awake time. And therefore, then they're catnapping all day long because they're not building up any sleep pressure. The challenge will always be that every time you've got to add some more awake time into your baby's day, they are going to have to build that stamina first. So it's a bit like, you're not going to run 5K. If you're learning to run, You're going to learn to run for a kilometre, then 1.5 kilometres, and then 2 kilometres. You need to keep on building up their awake time ever so gently. So just keep that in mind. It is so important. And the number of times, like, naps are so hard, but one of the challenges is that if they've only ever been conditioned to be awake for an hour, the day that you move them to 1:15, they will struggle for those 15 minutes for a few days until their stamina increases. Okay. The next thing is just making sure your baby is feeding well. I tend to encourage feeding on wake up rather than on put down so that we can really keep sleep and feeding separate. But knowing that if your baby is sleeping reasonably well, they'll have the energy to drink better if they are feeding on wake up rather than on put down. So whether that's bottle feeding or breastfeeding, one thing that I tend not to put too much focus on is the old-fashioned approach of at 4 months your baby should be feeding every 4 hours. I think if your baby's hungry during the day, they should be fed. And equally, in Singapore, it is important for your baby just to have a drink, especially this time of the year. So keep that in mind as well. So step 4 is making the room very dark. Now, I know, again, you've seen this slide before, but it's so important that I've mentioned a second time. When you go into your baby's room during the day, if you can hold your hand out in front of you like this and wiggle your fingers and you can see them, then your baby's bedroom is not dark enough. And to bust another myth, babies will not get day-night confusion if they sleep in a dark room at night time. Some babies are born with day-night confusion, but by week 4, week 5, they should have moved through that. So really, it's, again, I get this as a really big pushback. Oh, we've got blackout curtains, so it's dark enough. And then I go into their homes and it's like gaping. I call them the fingers of gods coming through the top of the curtains, through the middle and through the sides. It's oftentimes not enough. So making the room super dark is really important. And to that point, I get a lot of pushback when parents say to me, but if they're only used to sleeping really well, like in a really dark space, what happens when we go on holidays? And it's a valid point, but my argument will always be if you've got 4 weeks of holiday a year, which then means that for the next 48 weeks that they are at home, then isn't it best to try and optimize their sleep space during the times that they are at home? So that when obviously if you've got a baby that is sleeping really well at home, they're actually more likely to sleep better on the go anyway. And then the last step in this is we're going to introduce a consistent bedtime routine. And I often say to parents, if putting a sleep training process, like methodology, into play will not be successful if you don't have the right bedtime routine. We call the bedtime and nap time routine, like the term is sleep hygiene, making sure that it is exempt of any sleep props. And a sleep prop is anything you do to help the process along. So the first thing is to make sure that the bedtime is early. Now, for babies 3 months and older, we generally suggest a bedtime that falls somewhere between 6 and 8 o'clock at night. Newborns are a little bit different. They can often have a bedtime as late as 10, 11 o'clock. So this is, as I said, between 6 and 8 is for a 3-month-old and beyond. The second step is to make sure that they're sleeping in the same space all the time. You know yourself, you sleep best in your own bed, don't you? So it stands to reason that our babies feel the same way as well. So making sure that they are sleeping in a consistent space, whether that's in your bedroom or whether that's in their own bedroom. But it shouldn't be that I've got a lot of parents that will have their babies nap in the living room during the day and then put them into their bedroom at nighttime. They will always sleep best in the same environment. Keeping the bedtime routine simple. Your bedtime routine should be the same process every single night. It should include a night feed, a feed. It should also, I believe, include a bath. Now, I know that, I get a lot of pushback about bathing babies at nighttime and getting chills, but I know as an adult here in Singapore that it is so hot and sweaty that I always have a shower going to bed, and it makes me feel better because it helps regulate my body temperature. The same is true for babies. And I do think it is a really lovely activity for them to have going into bedtime because they can splash off the last of their energy before getting ready to wind down for bed. The next step might be a bit controversial because it's kind of more moving into the sleep training, but trying to put your baby down awake. Now, I know that if your baby, like the challenge is that if your baby has only ever fallen asleep in your arms, that's where it's learnt that sleep happens. But in order to get the best out of our sleep, we should fall asleep where we expect to wake up. So that means putting your baby down awake in their cot. And then the last step is just wait. Like if you put your baby down and they fuss a little bit or start to cry, give them a little bit of time. I'm not saying that you have to walk away from the cot or the bassinet or wherever they're sleeping, but if the minute they cry, you pick them up, then go back to rocking them, then again, they're not going to learn to sleep in that dedicated sleep environment, okay? I really do believe a really good bedtime routine starts with a milk feed, is only about 30 minutes long, 30 to 40 minutes long, starts with milk, bath, pajamas, story, and then into bed ready to fall asleep, okay? Now, I have put together a new handout, which is called this Rested Baby Happier Days. And it includes a bit on creating a sleep sanctuary, that last slide on putting together what a good bedtime routine looks like. And it also has that table about awake windows, etc., and how much sleep your baby needs. So if you'd like to download that, if you use your camera and use the QR code, you can download the information from there. I've just actually put in there today as well a new sort of like what an ideal day might look like if your baby were to start the day at 7 o'clock based on their awake windows. Please bear in mind, I am not delusional enough to think that every baby's going to wake up at 8 o'clock and every baby's going to do an hour and a half nap every morning. It's really hard work. So I just want to give you a bit of guidance for what might be possible for their age group. Okay, so that's it from me today. I am happy to answer any questions.
Wow. Louise, thank you so much. I hope everyone has found that useful so far. I can talk about sleep with Louise all day long. I absolutely love the fact that it's so science driven. Like it's real. We're not doing this just based on a whim, and it's not emotional. It's like it's real science. It's chemical reactions happening in the brain that we can gently use. I think it's so powerful for people to understand that. We do have some questions. I will read this out for you, Louise. Our first question. Baby is 4 months soon and he started waking up crying from naps, either 30 minutes or an hour and a half naps. Is this the 4-month sleep regression?
Oh, good question. So the first thing is, let me just explain a little bit about what the sleep regression is. So when our babies are born, their sleep cycle is basically a 2-stage cycle with a lot of deep sleep in it. By the time your baby is 4 months, their sleep has fully matured. So it's a bit like, it's a bit like having a pack of cards. So in the first pack of cards, there was only 2 cards. And the next one, there's 4 cards. And through parts of the night, there's 5 cards. And basically what the regression does, it adds the cards and then shuffles them up a little bit. So it's a reorganization of sleep. What we tend to find is babies who have been reliant on their parents, they are reliant on a sleep prop, like something that you do to help them sleep, whether that's the use of a pacifier, feeding, touch motion, or even presence can be a sleep prop. Those babies tend not to sleep as deeply as babies that can put themselves to sleep independently. So what happens through the regression is that because there's more stages to the sleep cycle, it kind of ebbs and flows a bit like a wave. So there's smaller parts through those sleep cycles where the sleep is actually quite light, and therefore they've got more opportunity to wake up. So yes, it could potentially be, if they're waking up more frequently than what they were doing, it could be the sleep regression. I do think babies that wake up, say, after 30 minutes, in particular, they tend to wake up upset because they've woken themselves from quite a deep part in their sleep cycle. So they kind of wake up with a bit of a jolt, and then it's like, where am I? And especially if you've held them to sleep, that's the first thing, is like, well, where am I? When I fell asleep, I was in mummy's arms, but now I'm in the cot, or I fell asleep.
I do the same if I fall asleep having a cuddle from my husband. Yeah. and he suddenly wakes me up, like trying to do the roll off. I wake up grumpy.
Yeah, precisely. So the key to it is, like, if say they're waking up after half an hour and they are a bit upset, but then they calm down pretty quickly and they're full of beans, then it could actually also mean that they need a bit more awake time. If they're waking up cranky, it could be that they're a bit overtired. If they're finding it hard to calm right down, it could be that they're a little bit overtired. And the challenge really is that overtiredness and undertiredness look similar. Like, they share so many common traits that it can be really hard. And I haven't seen so much of it lately. And I'm a late bloomer to, like, just watching TikToks. I won't ever do them because I'm not bouncing around pointing at stuff or dancing. But there was a couple of years ago, there was such a big push about babies being overtired. Overtired was the worst thing that could ever happen. And what I found parents were doing is they were so scared of overtiredness that they were putting their kids down like 20 minutes earlier than they should have been, because they think that an awake window means the time from the time they wake up to the time they next should be asleep. Whereas an awake window, or I prefer the term activity window, is really the time from they come out of the cot to the time they next go into the cot. So I hope that's a really long way of me saying it could be this 4-month sleep regression, but it could be various other things as well.
Yeah, it's a bit of a science, isn't it? And it is a tricky time. I mean, crikey, I remember that time. And you said right at the start that it can change. It can change quite quickly. And yeah, especially in Singapore, with the amount of sunlight that we get here, something can tweak the day so easily for them.
It's really tricky too, because this time of the year, like, I mean, to be honest, it's actually been quite overcast this kind of in what I call high summer. We're in June now, and I know we've had some quite bright sunny days, but like even today is a little bit overcast. That actually bodes well for us. Our sleep drive should be a little bit more leaning towards wanting to nap. But having said that, it's a bit like, I work with a lot of clients in Switzerland, and they're babies that, like, they sleep like no one's business. Like, they're great nappers because the environment there in the wintertime, for example, is just so conducive to a duvet day. Like, and even like, so it is very different, whereas it's really hard here. And the environment plays such a big part in it. So as I said earlier, the darker you can get your baby's room, the easier they will find it to nap.
I love that. I'd forgotten that we'd had that prior conversation where you were explaining to me how you'd done the work with parents in Switzerland, and that it is so different for them. And not many people appreciate that. Like you say, lots of people are doing different methods that you can download off the internet, the books that you can buy, but it really does depend on where you are.
Honestly, yeah.
I think it's fascinating. We've got some more questions. Let me read out another question for you. Is there still hope for a 22-month-old baby? My girl still wakes up for milk at around 3 a.m. every night. How can I drop her middle of the night feed? Okay,
so first of all, my son was 3.5 and still getting a bottle at night time. And then after I slept trained my daughter, I slept trained him. So it is very possible. So do not lose hope. And do not buy into, like when I had my kids, the wives' tale that went around was, oh, if your children aren't sleeping well by the time they're 1, they'll never sleep well. And it just isn't the case. With regards to wanting milk at night time, it's starting to, obviously when she was a baby, like, we were all worried about making sure that our children were getting enough food. But at her age now, it's kind of leaning a little bit into, just because she wants it doesn't mean she needs to have it. So there's a bit of that element of it, because she is now in the prime boundary pushing phase where she's going to want things, and it comes down to, if you don't want to give it to her, then you've got to ultimately work with her to say, I'm sorry, sweetheart, but it's nighttime. We don't give milk at nighttime. And the other thing I would look at is are you giving her milk to go to bed? If she's getting, say, a bottle of milk or a sippy cup of milk just before she falls asleep at nighttime, then she's probably associating the milk with falling asleep. So when she does wake up at nighttime, that's what she expects. What I will say, though, is, like, say if she's going to bed at 8 o'clock at night and she's waking up at 3, at least she's getting some good consolidation of sleep. So, like, it's never awful. Like, in 10 years, I've probably worked with 5 really sleep deprived babies, like, that were doing crazy stuff, and I think my daughter was one of them. So, like, it sounds like, as long as there is a little bit of consolidation during the night time, it shouldn't be so bad. But it's kind of leaning into, as I said, just because she wants it in the middle of the night time doesn't mean it's working hard now to remove that habit, because that's all it is. It's a habit.
Yeah. Yeah, really. I mean, it's bordering between like the sleep and the parenting. And in the future, there's going to be so many more instances when little ones, as they grow, want something just because they want it, or just because they're used to having something. It's definitely not easy though. And always amazing to have the science in the back of your mind, and to have that support, to have someone to be able to message or know, like, okay, I've got someone helping me out here. I'm not alone.
Yeah, precisely. And it's a bit like this. Like, I fell down an Instagram reel hole the other day, and the British comic Jimmy Carr came on, and there's a clip that's going around at the moment because it's popped up a couple of times since that somebody in his audience says, what's your view on parenting?
I saw that one.
Yeah, and he said, it's hard work now for it to be easier later.
Yeah.
And like, it's very much, and look, this is probably going off on a little bit of a tangent, and I'm sure this isn't the case for your 22-month-old, but the challenge is that kids don't go off the rails at 15. Like, oftentimes parents will say, oh, they went off the rails, but they were probably off the rails when they were 6. And so it really is like removing these habits sooner rather than later will always be ideal. And it's also knowing that sleep training is about changing behavior. And in the first instance, it comes from changing your parents' behavior, not the baby's behavior, because the baby learns everything your baby knows is because they have lovingly been taught by its caregivers, which is mostly their parents.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my daughter is 8, and I really have to still double check myself. What have I inadvertently done to either allow or support that behavior?
Yeah.
And is it a question of, can I now gently back away from this, or do I need to put a hard line in the sand? And often that is literally, how quickly do I need the change to happen? If I need the change to happen super quickly, then I have to put a hard line in the sand, even with my 8-year-old. If I've got a bit longer to work this out, then I can gently wind my way back from whatever stage I've got into with her. Yeah, I totally hear you. I'm going to read another question out for you. My sleep-trained 17-month-old dropped to 1 nap per day around 15 months. Okay, so 15 months, dropped to 1 nap. In the last few weeks, she often wakes up in the morning, often with dark circles, and gets really grumpy until her nap around 12 p.m., which I usually cap at 2 hours. I do let her lie down for up to 2.5 hours if she is already awake, and there is no discernible pattern. Some days she wakes up after 1.5 hours, and some days she seems to want more than 2 hours. Is there anything I can do to improve her night's sleep so she wakes up feeling fresh? So we've got a 17-month-old, 2 months ago, dropped to 1 nap, having a nap around 12, trying to cap it at 2, sometimes a bit less, sometimes a bit more, but waking up grumpy. Did I get that right, I think?
Yeah. Okay. So I think, Kathy, you said that she's waking up grumpy in the morning.
Yeah, feeling grumpy until her nap. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, I'm not a doctor, but in my experience, when I've seen babies like that, it sounds like your baby's getting a really good amount of sleep. Like, if they're sleeping, doing it like, say, 1.5 hours to maybe 2.5 hours, I would often give, like, I always say, like, at this age group, you probably want them to have about 5 hours 15 to 5.5 hours of awake time after their nap. So if they're waking up at 2:30 and you're happy with an 8 o'clock bedtime or a 7:45 bedtime, then I'm happy for them to have a 2.5 hour nap if they want it. So that's the first thing. What's kind of sort of tingling my spidey senses is that when I hear that kids are getting a good night's sleep and they're waking up cranky and with dark circles, I actually will start asking more medical questions. And I'm obviously not a doctor, and I'm not saying that, but I would start looking at things like checking things like, is your baby mouth breathing? Do they wake up in the morning and do they have a really putridy smelling breath? The dark circles, do they snore? Like, it can often be a sign of sleep apneas. And I've had a lot of cases, I've had a lot recently actually, where we worked on the sleep behavior and everything's going well, but they're still really cranky. And it might be, I can remember a lot of parents will say, it's so cute, my baby snores. And it's like, well, yeah, that is cute if it happens once in a while, but if it's happening every day, there's a problem. So I do wonder whether the dark circle, like to me, the dark circles is kind of got me thinking that they're probably sleeping, but it's not like their sleep is interrupted by the lack of oxygen. So it could be that. Now, I'm not saying that it is, but it might be worth bringing it to the attention of your doctor. And then I would say if that's the case, then maybe a referral onto you. If things don't improve, then a referral onto an ENT just to have a look. Not all pediatricians will sort of see what an ENT will see.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It takes sometimes a special type of pediatrician to really kind of engage in that type of conversation. We do know some, though. You can always reach out to us if you. Yeah. But yeah, interesting you said that. You do see a lot. I see a lot of babies in the early stages, newborn stage, that start the habit of mouth breathing.
Yeah.
Can I read another question out for you?
Sure.
My baby is about 11 months old and wakes up with a jolt very often throughout the night or during naps. She tends to wake up, and even if we wait for her to sleep, she begins to wake up and stands in the cot to look for us. She's been struggling with naps too, sleeping less than 2 hours between 2 naps during the day. It's a little tricky since she does go to infant care. Is there anything I can do to help her sleep better in general? So 11-month-old.
Okay, so that's a bit of a tricky one for me because I've got like 20 questions that I'd like to ask around that, like what's her awake window? It's not unusual, like what I will say, it's not unusual to see, if you've got a baby that's sleeping really well at night time, it's not actually unusual to see their total nap sleep start to drop at around 11 months as they prepare to move to a 1 nap day. A baby who's sleeping really well, like say doing an 11-hour night, will generally move to a 1 nap day around the 13, 14-month mark. And what you tend to find is over 2 naps, they'll do less sleep than what they will then do as a 1 nap day. So it might be that they'll end up doing an hour and a half over 2 naps, but actually when they move to 1 nap day, they'll knock out 2.5 hours. So as I said, it's a really broad question. I'd love to dig into it a little bit deeper for you. And I'm going to be in a minute putting a slide up that talks about, like, if you want to book a free discovery call with me. I think that is one of those things because there's just so much it could be. It could be overtiredness. It could be some infant cares for 2 naps might do a nap at 9 o'clock in the morning, a nap at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and your baby might be going to bed until 9 and they're actually overtired. It could be the opposite. So I need a little bit more information for that, I'm afraid, because I would rather say that I need more information than try and give you an answer that isn't going to serve you.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I really do hope some people on here will reach out because it's such practical solutions that you come up with, and I know this speaking to you all the time, Louise. You really work around people's lifestyles, their rhythms. Everyone in the household gets some consideration because it's never just the baby and one caregiver. There's always more people in the house to consider.
It's also worth noting with that, though, that there, as you keep on saying, there is a science to this, and we have to try and sometimes meet in the middle in terms of, you might, as a parent, you might want a 10 o'clock bedtime for your baby, but I know from a sleep science point of view that that's not going to be ideal. And because it's unlike, like I said earlier, that a bedtime somewhere between 6 and 8 o'clock, and that's because our body reacts to the environment that it's in. It follows the sun, which means that a natural wake-up time will fall somewhere between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, some babies will sleep later into the morning, but that's usually because they're up through the night, maybe getting a lot of food, and like their body clock gets a little bit offset. So it's being mindful that I find that unfortunately some of the infant cares, their sleep schedules are a little bit off. And it's never going to be perfect because it's group care. You might say that I want my baby sleeping at 10 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and someone else might say they want their baby sleeping at 9 and 1. And like, it's not a nanny service. They put the babies of a similar age together and they've got to try and figure it out from there.
No, and it is always very difficult with childcare. I mean, I remember I used to do spot checks when I was changing routines or rhythms. I remember when we dropped the lunchtime naps, obviously certainly a bit older than the 11 months. But I remember I had to do spot checks at childcare just to make sure that she wasn't still being put down, because I suddenly started having 5 a.m. wake ups, and I had an inkling it was because preschool wasn't listening to my request. And sure enough, walked in, found her asleep. Yeah, I don't want to be
very common. I went through that as well. And my daughter would go to bed until 10, 11 o'clock at night. And that was like, that's not okay. That might work well in some families. It certainly didn't serve mine. So the struggle is real, but it's not insurmountable.
And I think what you just said, though, is really important. It's about what's right for your family, like what works for you. Sleep in our family is really important. My husband and I've always actually been early to bed, early to rise type people. So that meant that whatever method I looked at, we would have to tweak. We weren't anything that was literally kind of off the shelf because it needed to work with our lifestyle as well. I think we've got time. I'm going to try and squeeze in a couple more questions.
Yeah.
My baby is almost 3 months old and sleeps from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. every day. Feeds well in night. I feed her once at 11 p.m., 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Okay. But during the day, her naps are for an hour while sleeping on us. And if we keep her in the crib, then she sleeps only 20 minutes by herself. Her feeding during the day is also very sparse because she is distracted and wants to unlatch every few seconds to look at the fan or the pillow or something else. Oh yeah, been there. How can I improve the feeding session and sleeping sessions during the day? So it sounds like we do have a good sleeper at night, is feeding 3 times, let's say, in the night. But obviously it sounds like going like straight back down to sleep. So that's not the problem. It's more during the day that they're doing contact naps. If they don't contact nap, there's short naps and also very distracted during feeding.
Okay, so let me I think I'll address the distracted feeding first. My experience has been that if your baby is getting too much food at nighttime, they won't feed so well during the day. Now, I'm not here saying that 3 feeds for your baby is too many. But equally, the rule of thumb around like dropping night feeds in the sleep training world is if you've got a 4-month-old baby that's 7 kilos, they should technically be able to sleep through the night without food. Now, that's the rule of thumb. I don't necessarily follow that, but I would say that 3 feeds might be a little bit too much. And therefore, when they start the day, like if your baby's feeding at 6 o'clock, going back to bed and then starting the day at 7, I would imagine they're not feeding like as soon as they wake up because they won't be that hungry. If your baby is kind of feeding to drowsy before they go into the cot, then they're still using a sleep prop. So it means that drowsiness, like when you've got a newborn, drowsiness is fine. But as soon as you start edging up towards 4 months, drowsiness is not your job. Because if you help your baby achieve drowsiness, you may as well rock them off to sleep the rest of the way. Because drowsiness is the first stage of the sleep cycle. So I think that I would hazard a guess and say there's probably a feed-sleep association there. And realistically, again, it comes down to the way your baby falls asleep is what they will expect if they wake up. So if they're sleeping in the cot but you've helped them get really drowsy, or if you've put them in there awake, then they are likely going to wake up. And the first thing that happens when they wake up is they think, well, where am I? When I fell asleep, I was in mummy's arms or I was over daddy's shoulder. So I think that, again, I'd love to dig a little bit deeper with you because I think that's it's a good question, but I think that it's got me ticking around wanting to ask about 20 other questions with regards to what's going on in your scheduling. Because, look, if your baby is an independent sleeper and then they're all of a sudden doing short naps, well, then I know it's a sleep pressure issue, which means that sleep pressure is just a fancy term for a hormone called adenosine, which is built up through being awake, through awakeness and through activity. So when we talk about needing more sleep pressure, it really just means we need to add some more time into their day, into their awake window.
Super useful. Thank you. Oh, we are ever so close to the end, but I do have one interesting one here that I think will help a lot of people because it comes up quite a lot. My baby dislikes the swaddle since 2 weeks old and struggles to free her hands. Yeah, no, we all know the wrigglers. Should I force it on her to help her sleep better?
Look, it really depends how old the baby is. I generally will get rid of the swaddle from 3 months onwards. And look, regardless, I've had babies that have been swaddled until they've been 8 months old. And please do not do that because that is dangerous. But I'm just using it as an example. And that parent told me, but they've still got a strong startle reflex. Until they get the opportunity to try and control it. They're never going to. What I would say is I actually think that the babies that fight the swaddle tend to be the ones that need it the most, because they're fighting against it for a reason. Like, it's a jerky reflex. It's called the startle reflex for a reason. So I would say you might want to give opportunities during the day where you don't swaddle. Like I used to do when my kids were little. Look, my son was born in the UK, so it was a little bit different. He was a Christmas baby, so it was cold, and so he loved being swaddled. My daughter was born here in September in the heat, like it's hot all the time. For the first step of the day, I would swaddle her, but for the next couple of naps, I wouldn't. And then in the afternoon, I'd swaddle her, and I'd swaddle her at night time. So I gave some opportunities for her not to be swaddled, and then I gave some opportunities for her to be swaddled. I used the Love to Dream swaddle for her during the day when I did swaddle her. And look, I loved the traditional swaddle. And nowadays you can go onto YouTube and find an assortment of origami style swaddling that you can do with your baby. And sometimes I think it's just about seeing which one they might like. So, but I do think if your baby is only 2 weeks old, I would still persevere with it, but obviously giving some opportunities during the day to maybe just do a less supported nap, or getting the Love to Dream. Because what I like about them, it gives them the opportunity to have their hands up in a secured way, but it does give them the contouring through the body as well, which I think feels like a bit of a warm hug.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of the Love to Dream style swaddle as well. I mean, it's so good for the diaphragm as well. Yeah. It opens up the diaphragm, frees up the breathing. Absolutely.
And there's lots of, when my daughter was little, those Love to Dream swaddles were expensive. I know they've come down in price, but there's different variations on it. But I do think that some of them are quite good. I'll be really honest, I personally don't and I did try this with my daughter, the ones where you kind of Velcroed them. I don't know, it just gave me a bit of a vibe of psychiatric hospitals, I guess. So they're not my favorite, but again, if your baby likes them, then there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah. And the other little thing that I would say on that is, as much as they might not like being swaddled now, if you give them more activities, more reason to kind of do physical movement and play, maybe a little trip to the osteopath, see if there's any stiffness, anything like that involved. And if you can alleviate that during the awake time, then you might actually find that their nervous system slows down and calms down, and that they'll happily be swaddled during their sleep time as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, we've hit time. I think we'll probably go on for forever with questions here, but thank you so much, Louise. Really appreciate you being here. Louise is in the village, so you'll see her often answering questions about sleep. You can reach out to her, you can contact her through the village. She will happily accept DMs as well, so that you can book a discovery call with her to find out the next steps. And she's on the directory on the website, so you can always find her through there. And with that, thank you so much, Louise. Thank you to the village for joining us today. I hope you have a fantastic week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.